The crazy old bat was there again. Slumped on the bench outside my courtroom, she looked more like a mountain of rags than a person. She must have been wearing 4 coats and 3 hats. And God, the smell. And there was her ever-present wire shopping cart stuffed with God knows what. No matter how I tried to slip by her into my courtroom, somehow, even though she looked unconscious on the bench, she was watching. Her head would suddenly swivel in my direction, and there was a crazed, glazed intensity to her eyes, buried deep within a face of weathered wrinkles. And out from under all those clothes, she would pull that giant sheaf of ragged papers, and she holds it up and shakes it at me as though it were a sword, and she croaks, "My case, my case." I was a tough judge. That's why they elected me. I didn't care who you were or what your excuse was. If you do the crime, you do the time. I've stared down criminals who could easily have ripped my arms off and would have enjoyed doing it. Some people said I should show mercy and try to understand people and their problems. But justice only works if it's consistent and brutal. But this crazy old bag, I would cross through the courthouse basement and come up the back stairs just to get away from her. But still, somehow I knew she'd find me. Years ago, I once tried listening to her. I called her before the bench and asked her what her problem was. The case was some ancient grievance against a no-good son-in-law who sold the house and took the money. It had been through every court in the county, and she'd been turned away every time. She babbled on at the top of her voice, shaking one paper from another from that overflowing folder. It sort of made sense for the first half hour, but then it wandered off into delusion and shouting. I really do fear no one, not God, not any person, but this crazy old woman. She scared me. When I finally granted her judgment, I told people it was because she had worn me down day after day coming to the courthouse, and I was just trying to clean things up. But it's not the truth. I granted her judgment because she embarrassed me into it. It was Take Your Daughter to Work Day one year. And my beloved Sarah, just 12, was coming with me to the courthouse. And to tell the truth, I really wanted her to be impressed by what a great man I was. And I think I really am. But outside the courtroom, as I was pointing out my portrait along the hallway with the other distinguished judges, there she was, the crazy lady, bearing down on us, leaning on her wire shopping cart, a giant, ugly, smelly lump of clothes, waving that folders of papers like it was on fire. My case, he's taken everything from me, help me. Sarah folded herself into my judicial robes in fear, and I put up the hand and pushed past the old woman. Sarah was duly impressed by the ceremony of the court and the dignity of her father's work that day. But she seized on the old woman and wouldn't let it go, with the absolute justice of a 12-year-old. What did she want, Daddy? Why can't you help her? Aren't you a judge? Aren't you supposed to help? And I said, no, Sarah, you know, it's very complicated. And even I can't just make up the law to be nice to people. But Daddy, it says right there on the wall of your courtroom, justice for all. What about the old lady? It went on for 2 weeks, and finally, it was my daughter that beat me, not the old woman. I saw myself through a child's eyes which had no understanding of contingencies and complications, and after all my years as a judge, it was my child who shamed me into giving justice. I've taken a few liberties with the parable, as you noticed. But I think it's worth it to bring it a little closer to home. Because this parable seems so simple. The introduction says, don't lose heart, keep praying. But there's a lot more going on here than just that. It's not just about pray really hard and you'll get what you want. Because though we were taught that in Sunday school, we've lived through other moments in our lives when we really did pray hard, or someone we loved really did pray hard, and it didn't happen. This story is probably something Jesus picked up off the street, a rumor about a woman who'd overcome this bad judge, but he takes it and he turns it on its head, as he always does. Just listen to how weird it is. What's the comparison? He's comparing God to this unjust judge. Something weird about that. And he's saying, God is just like this corrupt judge who won't give anyone justice, but he's a little bit nicer. And you'll still have to pray a whole bunch to overcome God's reluctance to give you justice. Doesn't sound like the God Jesus has been talking about at all. Or you could just say, this parable is about, if you really want to change the world, just be obnoxious enough. I've seen it a few times here at Yale. But that's not it either. Jesus is taking this incredible story and he's turning it all around, because you notice it's a story of a widow and a judge. It's not just a story about somebody asking for what they want and getting it. It's a story about the least powerful person in society and the most powerful person in society. And he's contrasting them, and he's asking us partly, where am I in this story? I want to think I'm the widow, right? I'm faithful. I'm persistent. I'm someone who knows what I want and is humble about it and goes to God and asks. But what the parable is saying is, I'm the judge. I'm the person who wants to say that it can't be done, that it's too complicated, that we can't fix things. It's exactly what our whole society is telling us every day. Just watch the news one day. It's all about disempowering you and telling you it's too complicated to solve. We'll have 4 experts, or usually just 2, with completely opposite points of view, telling you why this is right and that is wrong, and leaving you in absolute paralysis. That's the message our society wants to give. It wants us to be the judge, to say, I'm sorry, I can't help. It's too complicated. Father John Shea writes about this parable, and what he said just took my breath away. He said, this parable is not about justice being given to this widow. This parable is about the widow's prayers being answered with endurance. The answered prayer is the widow's strength to keep coming back even when the answer is no. And the scary part, if I'm the judge and God's giving this strength to the widow, is that she's just going to keep coming. She's going to keep coming at me until I look at my life and see where the hurdles are that I'm placing in her path. The story ends with Jesus saying that God will hear the cry of his chosen ones for justice. And I wonder, how do I make myself one of those chosen ones? How do I make that cry my own when I'm at Yale? When I'm in the most privileged position in the world, no matter how much I have problems. Yes, I have problems. I pray about those problems a lot. But I'm still here. I'm still in a place where people make up the rationalizations to say why nothing can be done. This is it. This is the place, right? Yale's job is to complicate things, to give complicated answers, and to say why nothing can be done, or why you at least need to study another 20 years before you can get to the answer. Jesus seems to be wanting to say, you need to get down there with the widow. That's the only solution for someone who is in a privileged place, who is the judge, is to bracket for a moment what we know about how globalization and financial flows and all the things we know about politics, bracket them for a moment and go to that place with that widow and sit with her. Understand her experience, not to make you a bleeding heart liberal, because bleeding heart liberals usually talk a lot but don't do anything. But to get to that place where you actually understand her and sympathize with her and see the connections between where she is and where you are. The missing link, I think, is that 12-year-old's empathy that doesn't see someone who looks different or who lives halfway across the world or someone who seems strange as in another category. Go with a 12-year-old to the green on a bad day. Go with a 12-year-old on a trip to Nicaragua. They don't understand how complicated it is. They just see it. And they say, these are people. Why are they being treated this way? Jesus is stupid and stubborn about this. He won't listen to reason. Like the ghost of Christmas yet to come in the Christmas Carol, he just stands there pointing his finger at the bleeding man in the ditch beside the Jericho road. And he says, even a Samaritan can show compassion for a suffering stranger. What about you? What would it mean for me to give that cry for justice? It would mean that I and all my privileges would need to feel the injustice of them so much that not only would I feel the pain of those who suffer for no reason, but I would feel that much more the pain because I am someone who has everything for no good reason. It would mean I would need to go out onto the Yale campus and see not only the obvious injustices of access and salary and inheritance and background, the wicked in their BMWs and the righteous walking to work at 5 a.m., but I would also have to see the deeper injustices every day, the faceless thousands or millions who should be at Yale as much as I am, if not more so, but didn't get the breaks I did. I would have to see the people who work in the chicken processing plant who made my lunch. I would have to see the people in the sweatshops in Taiwan who made my clothes. I would have to see the people getting shot and starving and driven from their homes for no reason around the world. And I would have to see them all through God's eyes as God's beloved children, my brothers and my sisters, not in the pious sense, but in the literal sense. My brothers and my sisters. And then perhaps I could make that cry. This is not to say that even we privileged few here don't have our own individual struggles in life, but it is to say that the kingdom of God is not about me and God. It's about us and God, an ever-widening, inclusive circle that connects me to the suffering of the world. Not that I should be destroyed by it or defeated by it, but so that I can feel those connections and feel, finally, that I can let go of that hurt inside me that I've been burying for so long. That hurt when I see the injustice of the world and say, it's too complicated to fix. In this story, Jesus is saying to us, let me enlarge your love beyond just what's in your sight so that we might begin to understand God's love is not just about me and my family, but about everyone. Jesus is saying, help me help you out of your secure and protected life. Help me help you understand the cross, which was for all people. All people. Help me help you treat that hurt that that you've buried so deep inside, and feel compassion, not in that elite liberal sense, but the compassion of companionship, that I am beside the suffering